Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Mahmood with you at PTV World. In today's show, we will be taking a look at the situation in the aftermath of the floods that have devastated the country and affected 1/3 of the country and more than 33 million people. Unfortunately, it seems that the situation is not close to being over. We have, of course, seen in the past also forecasts of more rain in various areas of the country, including Sindh, and we still see that more rains are expected in areas of lower Sindh and elsewhere in the country as well, as the monsoon is stretching over in September as well. This, of course, is going to add to the problems and the sufferings of the people who are already reeling in the aftermath of the devastation that have destroyed their homes, destroyed millions of acres of crops, livestock, have taken people's lives, affected women and children, the elderly and the sick. And this is, of course, something that is still developing, and we're still trying to assess the kind of damage that exists, and that, of course, will be clearer once the water recedes, which is going to take another 3 to 6 months. We, of course, know that when we take a look at the extent of the damage, it's huge. Various parts of the country are affected. There is massive appeal for relief and rescue efforts and for aid from our international partners, which is also in line with the UN Secretary General's visit to Pakistan for this massive appeal. But we know that now there is a lot of other issues that we're also dealing with, including people who are dealing with outbreaks of waterborne diseases such as malaria, such as even cases of poliovirus, cholera. We've seen that there is also a dengue outbreak in Karachi and other parts of Sindh. And the kind of issues that we're seeing people experiencing in various relief camps in terms of access to medicine and healthcare facilities is a huge problem. Then, of course, there's the added issue of women in need, especially pregnant women, many of whom are expected to deliver next month. And there is also reports of, because of the lack of medical facilities, the possibility of many of them losing their lives during childbirth. So this is, of course, a very urgent and dire situation right now that needs our help. And on top of that, when we take a look at the Met Office and the situation with regards to weather forecast, more rain is, of course, not helping. So we're going to be talking about the current situation with regards to the floods and the impact that it's had, and then what needs to be done in terms of the outbreak of diseases and other issues such as economic crisis and food security. At the end of the program, we're also going to be taking a look at the political situation of the country and what is going on in terms of the cases that have been revived by NAB in relation to the Malam Jabba case, the Bank of Khyber case, and the BRT case. We're going to be taking a look at what exactly happened in the past and how these cases are going to be taken up now, and what this means for the political party, and in terms of course, the kind of accountability that has been expected in the past, what sort of issues are going to come up and how that's going to impact the larger political situation. That is going to be our show today, and for this and more, I've been joined, as always, in the studio by senior analyst Farouk Patafi, and we are going to be joined perhaps by another guest in the studio, but we're not sure yet if he's going to make it. But right now, we have with us online for our first segment with regards to the flood situation, and to talk about particularly the issues of health, Dr. Nouman Zafar, Assistant Professor of Medicine, UCF University of Central Florida. Thank you very much, Dr. Nouman, for joining us and being a part of the show today. Let me first start with you, Dr. Nouman. When we take a look at, of course, the extent of the crisis, there is a lot in terms of the flood and the rescue and relief activities that is going on that we have been discussing, and of course that's an urgent need right now. We've talked at length about all of that, but I want to focus with you in terms of the kind of issues we face in medical camps right now in terms of providing medical facilities and dealing with outbreaks of cholera, dengue, and other diseases. This means, of course, that there are people suffering currently who are sick. There are potential people who can get sick, and the fact that we don't have enough medicines or enough medical health care. In this situation, what sort of measures do you think are needed most urgently? And then when we talk about the scale of such a crisis, where there is a large number of people being affected, how do you think it can be handled?
First of all, we're in a great dire situation in Pakistan. I was really surprised to even see the report from Voice of America that there's 650,000 pregnant women being affected during the flood. So that's a really big number. So there are multiple aspects to it, and not only the aspect of helping them, especially for the food, but again, for the medical aspect is concerned, that is all linked together, especially the illnesses, the respiratory ball illnesses. There are 3 phases to it usually when you have a catastrophe like this. So first week is usually like respiratory borne illnesses, and they continue. Like you can have like a flu, you can have basic common cold viruses, and you can have obviously like COVID. And then the next portion starts is like like a foodborne illnesses. And I was watching, and probably everybody's watching all those videos with all those dirty water, and people like swimming in it. And if there is like rain continues, and then we don't have good water supply, you're going to get all the diarrheal illnesses like E. coli, multiple bacterias you can get. So you'll get like a stomach viruses. Number three depends upon the vector borne. Vector borns are mean like they are brought by some like a vector, which is mosquito. Like in Pakistan, there are two major factors. What I've ever seen, and everybody has seen, is like dengue and malaria. A lot of deaths have been linked to it. I mean, and that's one of the major issues will be, not even now, in the coming months, especially when this water, the stagnant water, actually a lot of mosquitoes grow. So there are like multiple aspects where actually the government, I mean, everybody, I think, have to pour in. All the doctors community, I would request from Pakistan, like especially the disastrous areas, they should set up some camps where actually the specifically one is the clean water. Number one, obviously, that's the first main thing. You will avoid all that E. coli and all the bacterial illnesses. And then you have the viral illnesses, which is coming from mostly through contact, through sanitation issues. So this is multiple step process, which I think you, me, everybody have to be involved on
Right.
every different aspect.
Right. Dr. Saab, I'm glad that you're talking about this challenge and how to actually meet it. One serious aspect is since there was flooding, a lot of DHQs and a lot of basic health units have been swept away as well. In that kind of situation, you don't have any local infrastructure to take care of the sick and the people who are suffering. What are the best practices possible to take care of such a situation? How to actually devise a plan or a program that all these people are taken care of, and with then of course those who might not be affected in the adjacent areas but their DHQ has been affected, they can also be taken care of.
So again, when we're doing all this disaster relief, you're just like people are giving the money and then food and stuff. I think we should specifically set up. I mean, I think this is a really important and a very like serious question, that all the areas which are like really badly affected. Means I hope there is a government management crisis, like a team which should set up like a medical camps. If the DHQ or your basic health unit is destroyed, even if they're not destroyed, you still need the help. So basically, it's like a clean facility. You can provide water there, some antibiotics, treatment for malaria, and especially for the pregnant woman, you can have. There are multiple things. Multivitamins itself is just a plain simple thing, but it helps a lot. But again, so you need to set up those medical camps at all those like major sites, and give them clean water, at least the clean water. So, and then the medications. But there are some illnesses, they are like so simple, but like malaria, they're simple. But the point is, if you don't treat it, they can become fatal. So that's
Right.
the issue, and especially for the
Dr.
kids.
Naman, but I'm still finding it difficult to understand in terms of how exactly that's going to happen, because we're short on medicine. Anti-malarial medicines are already short in these areas. There is of course the issue of existing facilities being destroyed. And I understand when you say that we can set up the camps, but there's also difficulty in getting enough people on board, enough medical aid, enough doctors on board, and then even if there's simple issues like providing safety nets to people in terms of malaria and dengue, we don't have enough. We don't have access to clean drinking water, and we can't really provide that. And then there's of course the issue of the fact that there is water still in various parts of these areas where there are people living. So a lot of the diseases that are coming from these issues, those water bodies still exist around these people. It's very hard to be able to separate these issues.
And my apologies that I'm adding to this question, but I wanted you to, and I totally get it, that I'm asking you to pull a number out of thin air. But could you put a number on the kind of money that might be needed for such a response?
Means, if you really ask me, like an American level, like you really have to go, it will be probably billions of dollars. But again, Pakistan is again suffering its own problems. That's why I'm saying it is not only the job of the government, it's the job of everybody. Even I'm sitting here, Orlando, far away from it. So, but I think I have a duty to Pakistan that we have to support whatever level I'm saying. So, set up a medical camp means do whatever best you can. The doctors there, I mean, I'm also planning in next few months coming to Pakistan and going to the area which is, I'm from Multan, basically going to the area which is closer, like Dera Ismail Khan and other places, doing something there. But the local doctors there, my advice is that we cannot leave everything on the government because, yes, we need a lot of money. I mean, we're talking about billions of dollars or at least few $100 million. But again, if the local people, local doctors, we're talking specifically the medical, local doctors itself, that they can take like a day or two off, go to that, set up a camp, means special some NGOs, they can get some help from the NGOs. You just need a tent there, you just need a tent, and you take the medications, whatever you can. Again, we don't need so many medications. We need very basic stuff. We need basic antibiotics, we need basic antimalarials, we need basic stuff. And these things can be taken. People have donated a lot of money, and people are willing to do a lot of things even by themselves. So the local doctors, whether it's Islamabad, whether it's Multan, Lahore, my advice is take a day or two off, schedule with each other, and say, guys, you go for 2 days, and I'm going to go for 2 days. Sit down there. You will feel even happiness helping out all these disastrous situations, and the people will actually pray for you. So I think we all doctors, whether in sitting in United States, whether we can support with the money. If you really cannot go, then support with money. And
Right.
about us, go ahead.
Absolutely, and Dr. Namana, of course, I appreciate that sentiment, and of course we welcome all sorts of help and every individual coming forward and doing that. But Farooq, when we take a look at the various issues involved in actually providing that help in a more efficient and systematic manner, and to making sure that we really are able to reallocate our medical resources to these parts is going to be a difficult task, especially when we realize in the post-COVID era, we saw the way that our healthcare system needs a lot of help and is broken in so many ways and needs to be restructured, reformed, so that we can actually provide help. Considering that now we're in this catastrophe and we're faced with these issues, and if we're talking about our own resources and mobilizing them to meet the needs of the people, how do we do that within the current system?
Right, Sana, of course, the sentiment the Honorable Doctor is actually channeling, I think that if every Pakistani actually starts channeling that, we are going to have a better place here. But I remember that even in usual times, people tend to not go to, especially doctors, not go to small postings like in villages and elsewhere. They seem to like to cluster towards a big city. So it might be a bit difficult at this moment for anybody to be so motivated that they actually go out of the way to such places, right? But we keep on trying and we keep on asking them to do it. That is the simple thing that is possible. Then there is also a giving tree in our midst. Every time we play politics, we end up blaming army for something that we may not like. I'm talking about the media and the punditry of this country. But army actually, during crisis, actually really steps up and helps a lot. Army Medical Corps is also a very vibrant entity. And I'm hoping that Air Force, Army, and Navy can pull together their resources as well and deploy them so that you immediately have some kind of medical resources available. And I'm not merely talking about medicines themselves. I'm talking about a practitioner being present, because when you give medicine to a person who is not literate, there's a possibility of ODing or damaging one's own body. In that situation, of course, you need a practitioner on the ground to actually help them understand how to take it. Then the first thing, of course, is water, because food and water are something that we have to consume no matter what. And in that situation, when you are surrounded by, as Dr. Saab was also pointing out, by contaminated water, water that might actually have diseases or germs in them, then the first thing is to help them understand how to purify water for drinking, right? A lot of people are still displaced, and they're either sitting in camps or in these patches of land which are left behind by the water. There you have to actually help them get the kind of medicine that might be needed for purifying water, not bottled water, but regular techniques to do it, then filtering it, other techniques, whatever is possible. And then, of course, we can actually fill in the gap regarding medicines as well. But that is going to need money. And that's why I keep on, every time I talk to a specialist, I keep on asking for some kind of estimate of how much will be needed, because once we have that number, we can start raising funds. We can go to people and raise local funds, and of course, we can ask the international partners to also chip in. Without data, without the estimates, without the needs being clearly defined, we can't do much.
Absolutely, and that's of course really important, and we are really running out of time in terms of getting help to these people, and so there needs to be urgent action on that as well. Dr. Nauman, earlier you mentioned the fact that there are many pregnant women, and you were surprised to look at the numbers, and of course that is a real issue, and we've seen so many of these women already giving birth to their children in relief camps. There are many expected to give birth this month and the next. And so when we look at the particular needs of women, there's of course the issue that has been pointed out repeatedly in terms of the kind of cultural issues that also exist, the kind of support that women need, and many other needs of women that are not being able to have met. And this is of course an issue that needs our special attention. When we talk about the needs of pregnant women in particular, then when we take a look at the current situation that they're in terms of the relief camps, in terms of where they're situated, how exactly do you think we can provide help for them to have a safe childbirth experience, and also in terms of them and their fulfilling their needs in terms of the social conduct and code that exists?
So first of all, I mean, in this disaster situation, I mean, there is no 100% like a real way. It's just the best effort possible. Okay, I do want to mention one thing which really New York State did during start of pandemic. So if you remember when the pandemic started, the New York was hit really bad. What they did is, and I think that one thing government can easily do, that all the medical students, the people who don't have a license, they granted them emergency license. So if we are looking at that way, because that we don't have staff enough, yes, we need money, definitely. We need to have data. I totally 100% agree that at least the government, that the portion is by the government. Then you need to calculate how many medical camps you need, like 100, 200, 500, whatever the camps. What are the requirements for those camps? And then it's the way you can calculate how much money exactly needed for those, for example, 500 medical camps. That's number one thing, money. Number two, obviously, you need the staff, you need the manpower. So if the bigger doctors were in Karachi, Lahore, Islamabad, they are not able to take days off and go there. Other thing I can suggest is, which New York State did, that granting an emergency medical license to all the medical students. So they actually, and those students actually went in the hospitals in New York, and they were really big help. I mean, they're medical students, they know the medicine. And when you have a shortage of staff, at least medication administrations, like looking up what medications can be given, these medical students can easily give. Even like a first year or second year medical student do know that how to treat a malaria. So I think if we have a shortage in the staff, that's one option is possible, that grant them just.
Right, and that's actually quite an interesting point, Farooq, but it seems that we haven't.
And it can be connected to their accomplishment eventually, their degree as well.
Yes.
Tomorrow, once you have done it, then you can get some kind of reward as well, or recommendation or commendation. So that's a great idea. Yeah,
it's a wonderful idea, but I was concerned in terms of the kind of inertia we seem to have with regards to out-of-box solutions. It seems that we quite hesitant to go forward with that. Do you think we can do something about it?
Right. Whenever I hear the word out-of-box solution, I have to first look around to spot the box itself. I don't see the box at all. So everything is literally out of the box. Inertia is there. And the overall system is so inertia-ridden. And then there's this inherent carelessness when it comes to authority, especially when it comes to the local authorities, that it becomes difficult to actually mobilize them or to make them do anything. But right now, because their own homes might also be sunk, there is a good reason for people to actually be motivated and go ahead and do something about it, especially doctors. As Dr. Saab was saying that he comes from Multan, so adjacent areas, he feels he owes something to those areas. Similarly, if there are people or students or then accomplished doctors who actually come from these areas which are affected, perhaps there will be some emotional appeal to them as well to go back and deliver, right? I think Dr. Saab is back if he wants to finish his point. Sana?
Yes, Dr. Naman. Would you like to please unmute yourself? We can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I said the New York State do the emergency authorization for the medical license for the students. So that's one option, is to actually at least help somewhat for your staffing issues. You need money, you need really the total numbers of medical camps, and then if you are able to grant like a temporary status for the medical students, that's one of the staffing issues. Then the issue comes up, yes, you need gynecologists, or if you don't have gynecologists, again, the female medical students who are willing. I'm pretty sure in Pakistan there will be thousands of medical students who will be really happy to go and help in these areas, help them out. Yes, it is a coordinated effort. No one person can do
Dr.
it.
Saab, sorry to cut you, but most of these areas also have lady health visitors or workers as well. So perhaps they can be deployed as well, because they're, this used to be their forte.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. Even the access to the area, especially the Kalam and some of the areas in the Sindh, I was talking with some other friends, is very difficult right now. But again, that portion, there needs a coordinated effort between the government, the army, and some civil, like civil structure of the government. So there can be like all these students, like a female students, if they want to go and work in these areas, they should be able to like go like securely with the help of some our local agencies or army or police or whatever. So they have a security and they can also go in these areas and help. And I am 100% sure the people or the students of medical students and a lot of doctors will be very, very happy to go in these areas, provide their services, even for a few days at a time. But again, they need the infrastructure, at least somebody to provide them security and an access to these areas. So that again, you and me cannot do it. We can just do a suggestion, but that has to be a coordinated effort by the government and the army together to actually arrange these camps and bring the medical staff. We call them medical staff, whether it's a student, whether it's a healthcare worker, or it's a nurse or a doctor. Anybody helps in this situation right now, and especially the pregnant woman. When you hear this Voice of America saying 650,000 pregnant women in these areas, that's like a big number and a very concerning number. We really need to help these ladies, because the social issue is majority of them will need that. I want like a female doctor. So I think my suggestion again is still stays there. Grant them emergency medical licenses, or at least work in these disastrous areas to anybody. A lady health worker, you have medical students, or you have even the students or the just recently finished medicine. All the students, they are looking for jobs. There are like thousands of people who hasn't even joined a job, and they are available too, and they will find, I'm pretty sure they will be willing to work if
And
there's a
this can add
coordinated
to their
effort that-
CV as well. This can add to their CV eventually as well when
Oh,
they go
definitely.
out, for seeking job. But let
Right.
me, Sana,
Yes.
with your permission, actually flip the roles, and let me ask you a question. Have you been watching Pakistani television of late?
Yes.
The news channels?
Yes.
Dr. Saab just pointed out a number coming from Voice of America, right? About pregnant women. Have you seen any news channel, Pakistani channel, reporting on that, with the exception of PTV, of course, reporting about women's condition in these areas?
Absolutely not. And it's quite unfortunate. And we talked about this earlier as well, with not just pregnant women, but women in general and their needs of menstrual care as well, and other issues which were not being put to light and were only highlighted within our own country after an international media outlet took notice and talked about it. So it's quite unfortunate. And even with regards to women needs in general, and specifically with these floods, we find it unfortunate that we don't really see it aired enough, talked about enough. And unfortunately, with regards to just even flood, Farokh, it seems to not be a priority at the moment on various channels.
And we are going to talk about that as well. But what do you think is the reason why our media is so embarrassed to report on women, especially in the stranded areas.
It is quite unfortunate, but I think it's just I guess a social and cultural issue where we're still not
Social and
being
cultural
able to
issue?
talk about issues such as menstruation. Yes, you were saying something?
Yeah, social and these taboos and all everything. Of course, menstruation might be a fact that perhaps media doesn't report on, but pregnancy is a very
Yeah.
commonly discussed issue.
Yeah.
But I think that at this moment, as you pointed out, media is busy in doing other things. For example, politics. And my concern at this moment is that the media's own business model and its approach to this actually obscures the fact that media itself actually is made of common people. It is not made of Pakistan's elite, right? This is very important to understand. No matter who comes in power, no matter who goes out of power, there will be elites who actually rule the country. So we should have an affinity towards our fellow man or woman because they are common people and we are common people, and this catastrophe could befall us as well. And because of that, perhaps it is high time, because usually the plight of these people who are already poor and they are in very disconnected areas is not highlighted. It is a high time that we can actually bring it to the fore, highlight it, make it a center of focus or attention, and get whatever we can get for them or their relief by the very same elite who are going to actually rule the country in the coming future as well. It is high
Absolutely.
time, right?
Absolutely, it is. And we really hope that we see some sort of action with regards to that and some sort of change. It's unfortunate that we don't get to prioritize or emphasize on issues enough which require importance, and we're focused on other things which don't require that much attention from our side. But that's unfortunate. Dr. Naman, the current situation also points to the fact that there is going to be a spread of these diseases as well. And I understand it may be really hard to contain this spread considering the issues of people being stranded in various locations, being in relief camps, being in very close quarters with each other, and of course with water bodies existing all around. But is there any way in terms of how we can plan this or mobilize our resources in a manner where we can identify particular patients and help to somehow prevent the spread of the disease? Of course, in terms of the COVID-19 outbreak as well, there were measures that were exercised. There were standard operating procedures that were told to people to exercise and practice so that we can curtail it to some extent. Is there anything that can be done in such a situation?
Yes, first of all, if this number is correct, like 650,000 pregnant women, I think right now the total death toll is not that bad um, as compared to the destruction we see. But again, in next coming months, that's a big concern from like as a medical doctor, and I think it should be a big concern for the government too. They are very vulnerable, these pregnant women and these newborn babies. I think the biggest death toll you can see, and I hope not, and I pray that it will never happen. But again, initial flooding, we don't have a big like a death toll. But if we are not able to focus on these, especially, I think you really took up a very important topic today, that the pregnant women and especially the newborn babies and the coming newborn babies. If the focus has not been there, then they are at really high risk for mortality, like mortality, and especially the maternal mortality during childbirth and after the newborn babies. So we need pediatrician. We need pediatricians. We need gynecologists. Again, the same thing comes at the same place. Yes, spreading, giving out the tents. That's an important thing. The mosquito nets, because we prevent the malaria, especially the malaria and the younger kids is really deadly. And giving them more tents and like separating them apart, because all your common cold viruses, your COVID, your majority of your respiratory viruses, there are like 21 respiratory viruses you can have with flu and then adenovirus and RSV and so many others. And they all spread because of close proximity, everybody sitting there, dirty water, and then you come up all these other diseases, mosquitoes and stuff. So yes, they need to have some housing mean like even in tents. And again, we talked about clean water, but again, everybody needs a coordinated effort. This country needs a really coordinated effort between the government and everybody else together. But we really
Right.
need to focus in next 3 to 4 months, especially the winter is coming, on the pregnant women and the newborn babies.
Right. Dr. Naman, I understand this may not be your area, but there's obviously, of course, issues of mental health which directly impact physical health as well. And we've seen that a lot of people, of course, are undergoing a very extremely stressful situation in terms of the loss and damage that has occurred, the personal trauma that they've experienced, and then, of course, the kind of stress of the future that currently exists as well, along with the physical illnesses that they're dealing with. This also includes pregnant women and other people who are undergoing this particular issue. And again, unfortunately, this may not be a priority, but we've been seeing cases of suicides in various parts of the country as well, which is a real issue right now. In terms of how we can actually interact with the people, with the patients and their mental illnesses and health, and to ensure that somehow that sort of support is provided, can that be also done in a way where we can take this into account in the physical health of these people?
And Dr. Saab, because we are talking about these challenges, every question that we actually put to you, it seems that the problem is not only unlimited, but it is growing and mutating as well. So how do you, Pakistan is a poor country, we have limited resources. How do you actually mentally tackle such a big issue, especially at the policy level, that you can break it down into small pieces and then take care of all those problems? Because there seems to be a disparity between the resources or whatever our understanding is and the demand, which is so unlimited and big that it frightens everybody.
First of all, this mental health issue, this is not actually out of scope from my side, because we as a primary care doctor, I see almost like every third patient has anxiety or depression. So even after COVID, almost again, every third person was coming with anxiety. But again, this is a very well documented fact after the catastrophes, the flood, the fire, or any kind of pandemics or epidemics. A person, you can imagine a person who lost his family or lost his house or his land to during the flood. This will be actually among all those stages that you provide immediate relief and then you provide the secondary relief. It's going to be in the tertiary phases, definitely, that their mental well-being. The anxiety, the depression, it's a very common phenomena, especially when you if you lose, God forbid, anybody of the family member. But again, if you don't even lose a family member, just losing some financial aspect of it, you lose your money or house or anything, that's going to be a big challenge. Again, I'm saying Pakistan means even for America, it was a big problem, big issue finding mental health counselors here. Right now, we really have a shortage even in the United States about like psychiatrists, psychologists, mental health counselors. If I have to, I'm saying every third person having the trouble after the COVID. So we are talking, and this is like a chronic issue. We cannot find psychologists, psychiatrists, mental health even counselors. They call us mental health counselors. But Pakistan is already suffering all this, and on the top of this, these flood victims really need, that's another stage, that's another speciality, that these mental health counselors, honestly, I don't know how big of a number we have in Pakistan who are able to help, but again, same thing comes up with the same point, that as a coordinated effort, even from the medical community, I think these programs like this, they should happen on all the channels, not only one place, because one place, obviously you have some people are looking at it, maybe a few million and stuff, but everybody needs to coordinate, all the media has to coordinate, give people awareness that these are the issues. This is not only an issue of losing a house, but again, you have a very important question that among all those steps, one of the steps is the mental health, and the people will start doing suicide. Even if they don't do suicide, people are extremely depressed and they're crying. If you see the videos, it's like really heartbreaking. But I think you're raising an interesting and a very, very important point that I don't think any other channel, honestly speaking, I have seen focusing on this issue specifically, that we have to deal with mental health issues. We all focused on building the road again and maybe building the house again. And that is definitely a main thing, because if you are going to rebuild them, rehabilitate them next few months, especially the winter is coming. But again, during that time, that mental health crisis, it's a big crisis. It's already had COVID. It was good that Pakistan was not in a very bad situation with COVID. In United States, it was a total different ballgame. But again, the Pakistan is a very bad situation with the flood right now. So the question is, how many mental health counselors we have, how many psychiatrists, psychologists, and how many are willing to actually go and help these guys. Again, the medical community can help. In this situation, really, all the doctors, I would request, I will pledge that everybody at least take some time, try to do not only the medical help, and the next step will be like a mental well being. Again, it's a coordinated effort. Only we can, you and me and all of us who are sitting here on the TV can request, but people have to understand that just not only giving money will help, but actually they need your time also.
Right, absolutely, Dr. Saab. But let me qualify the question about unlimited, need. Let me just look at the layers. The first layer, of course, is rescue, when people, their lives have been totally destroyed. The second one is survival. The third one is a rehabilitation of some kind. But in the middle, there are other layers. For example, food. Then we spoke about water. Then medicine. Then physical counseling and mental counseling as well. Especially you were talking about people who might have endured the loss of family member. That is quite evident, right? It is quite big. But there are children involved, and animals also, livestock also got destroyed, and there are kids who might actually be attached to them as well. So there is this infinite need, and this needs to be some kind of complex response to this. Do you think that any country, let alone Pakistan, could have handled this crisis alone, or there should be some need from other organizations? For example, WHO could actually step up the plate as well, or some other international organizations as well.
I mean, 100%. Means WHO, even United States and other bigger countries, like, first of all, they have resources and money to actually provide these. Any kind of disaster. In United States, I can tell you, like, for example, if there's a lot of school shootings here in United States every year. What they do, the first thing the government do, after all the initial layering you said, and it's really very well you put it in, they set up a mental, what you call is a mental disaster relief management. And there are mental health counselors there, and they actually sit down with all these kids and people who are undergo through that traumatic. It's a post-traumatic stress, is a traumatic experience. So whatever experience can be, it can be an accident, it can be flood, it can be like a shooting victim. But these people really need help. And again, all these international organizations, the bigger international organizations, the bigger countries, the European countries, the Americans, if the government requests them, I think they will be able to provide not only the financial support, maybe at least the basic infrastructure, how to do this, how to set up. Means every single city I've seen in United States, whenever there is a disaster in that city, among setting up other things, they do set up a mental health disaster management. So if you are stressed out, if you're having suicidal thoughts, there's like a suicide prevention line. So we have it.
We don't have that.
Use it.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have that. But Dr. Saab, you just mentioned one term that actually rang a bell. You just mentioned PTSD, right? In a country where we have been enduring war and terror or fighting terrorism for quite some time, and so many people were taken from us because of terrorism, we seem to have developed at least some basic infrastructure to combat PTSD as well. Do you think that especially when it comes to police, their units, and they have their healthcare units, or army or other such services, their PTSD units could or elements could also help in, and they could also help in resolving this situation? Because you are right, what these people are enduring is PTSD.
I mean, definitely, if they have the units, I personally have no idea if they had the units which would deal with PTSD. That's a really good thing. That means you already have some basic start. Because here I was mentioning that there is a suicide prevention line. If the people who are having a lot of anxiety and they're thinking I'm suicidal thoughts, if they come to me, I call that line. Patient can call themselves too. Right away, they actually get evaluated and they get admitted in the mental hospitals, at least for first few days, when the patient is having suicidal thoughts. Again, I know Pakistan lacks a real infrastructure in that situation. But again, for emergency purposes, that can be a setup, like a suicide prevention line. I'm giving an example, like instead of like 511, you can have like 811, or like something like this. So that people who have a mental health crisis, they can call. But like on the back end, You need to have the infrastructure when somebody is calling, how to manage this. If it's in Karachi, if
Right,
it's in Sindh,
absolutely.
if
And
it's
it
in
boils down to that, Dr. Naman, that we already need to have such infrastructure in place, irrespective of such tragedies and issues that we're facing right now. But thank you very much for sharing your time and being with us today, Dr. Naman Zafar, Assistant Professor of Medicine at UCF. Thank you very much for being with us in the debate. We're going to be taking a look at, of course, the situation with regards to the floods and keep updating you with reference to what's going on. Yes, Farooq.
I just wanted to slip in a line regarding, the suicide prevention. I've spent a lot of time in Islamabad. Here, I have had friends who took their own lives because of some kind of erosion of confidence or something, right? So I've been pushing for this idea that we should have a suicide prevention line, or at least all provinces should set up one. Unfortunately, we have seen that NGOs might have started a couple, but they are not that well known. Nobody else has. And I think this is about time that we ask all the authorities to look into this matter also, because it is a serious issue, even without this flood crisis, and it has been growing over the years.
Right, absolutely. And we really need to work on these issues as well. Lastly, we're going to take a look quickly at the political situation of the country with reference to the cases regarding NAB and what has been retaken up in terms of the Billion Tree Tsunami Project, and of course various other issues such as the Malam Jabba case, the Back of Khyber, and the BRT as well. Farooq, earlier we understand that these cases were shut and a clean chit was given, and now they're going to be retaken up again. Why exactly did that happen? And when we talk about these cases being brought up over again, there seems to be an entire procedure which they undergo before we can actually see any sort of investigation and action being taken. Can you also explain a bit about that?
Right. These cases this time were flagged by Public Accounts Committee, right? Its job it is to actually go through all the audit paras and look at the numbers and look at the discrepancies. Usually there is a system in place independent of Parliament that actually takes care of Auditor General of Pakistan, right? His office actually goes through all the books and then audits and points out that there are discrepancies. And then Public Accounts Committee, which is a very powerful institution within the parliamentary system, looks at those numbers. When you're in power, there is usually this tendency of the system to be kinder towards you, right? And that's why, and remember that the man in Malam Jabba case, the then secretary of the CM, ended up being the Prime Minister's secretary, right? The principal secretary of Prime Minister Azam Khan. If you know anything about Pakistan's bureaucratic or governance system, usually it is not the Prime Minister who wields actual power. It is the principal secretary whose signatures actually make the papers move forward, right? So at that time he was kind of given clean chit by NAB. Then the judiciary also, I don't know whether they were shown all the facts or not, but somehow there was some kind of concession. But because there is a discrepancy in the papers, because there are discrepancies in the books, the PAC has flagged them and then actually asked the NAB to take notice of certain cases, and they are going to actually open it again. Malam Jabba, you have said, BRT is a big issue that needs looking into, umpteen others as well. So in the coming days, what you are going to see is that these cases will be reopened and re-examined by the bodies which actually dropped the ball at that time. Remember that these are cases related to PTI, Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, and even at that time when Khyber Pakhtunkhwa government, only Khyber Pakhtunkhwa government for the first time was under their control. At that time also NAB actually tried to take notice of these matters, and they tried to shutter NAB and try to actually create their own local institution, right?
Right.
Their own accountability process, and somehow they sidestepped the existing one. So now it is going to come back to haunt them. And the biggest problem is, Sana, there used to be a TV series in our neighborhood. It was called Saas Bhi Kabhi Bahu Thi, the mother-in-law once was also a daughter-in-law. So every politician who keeps on using corruption as a slogan or fighting corruption as a slogan has to remember that when they come into power, governance in this country is a complex and often corrupting influence. And because of that, they are going to end up leaving behind many loose ends. Those can be pulled, and then the similar kind of cases can be built against them as well. Remember, for a very long time, when PMLN was in its populist swing, at that time they used to accuse People's Party of similar kind of things. Then later on, PTI emerged and started accusing PMLN of the similar things, and now this is happening to PTI as well.
Right.
So the politicians have to remember that when you actually really magnify these issues, there are systemic problems and then there are actual corruptions. If you want to do it, then you cannot afford to spare your own.
Absolutely.
And once you do, then this happens.
Right. We'll talk more about this as well in our other shows as the situation evolves. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for in this show. Thank you very much, Farooq, for being with us, as always, in the debate. That's all that we have. Of course, we'll keep updating you with regards to the flood situation, which, of course, is the most urgent and important matter in the country today. And that is, of course, what we need our attention to be at, and the world's as well. And so we really hope that we can do as much as we can to help the people who are suffering right now. That's all that we have from the debate. See you tomorrow.